We are officially midstream in the episode number 154. We're calling it the MMA 101 Part 3. And as we talk about that, we're very excited to have our next guest. He's on the line timely, our good friend and advocate of human rights, Joe White. We're going to get him on that one right here. The Michigan Justice Commission. Joe, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am. How's it going?
Thank you. And you may or may not remember. I know you probably, but you have been on the show before, and I was fascinated at the time you were discussing Michelle Alexander's book. And I don't think it's something that can ever be spoken about too much. But one of the things that fascinated me before we talk about your other projects, explain again the concepts that are in the book about how the Supreme Court was never intended to be litigating or taking on cases and deciding issues dealing with privacy, and have been forced to because of the drug war. That all these issues of the government's right to get into the home or not were driven by the drug war, because the only reason the Supreme Court had to hear a issue about a search warrant is because of the war on drugs, right? If that didn't exist, there would be, I don't know how many fewer cases. That was the point, but expound on that. I may not have articulated it like it should be.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, prior to the drug war, the Supreme Court really did not involve itself in issues relative to drugs in the United States. And once that began to happen, in fact, Thurgood Marshall was a dissenting judge in one of the major Supreme Court rulings relative to search and seizures and things of that nature. And he's laying it that there is no drug exception to the Constitution. And those words that were uttered by him in his dissent on one of the cases, almost went silent until recently when we, as community advocates, began to reinvestigate this issue of mass incarceration. So, prior to the drug war, the Supreme Court was pretty much hands off on, most civil issues. So, here we are in 2013, and boy, what are we looking at now? The rollback of almost 70 years of civil rights work.
Right. I mean, in the context that you explained, there's no way that the Founding Fathers ever thought that the Fourth Amendment would be challenged on these privacy issues, that we have gone way past the original intent, that it was really a barrier, that we weren't going to create exceptions, good faith exceptions, and that all of this has come about from the constant interaction between the government and the privacy of individuals, especially in their home, especially on the street, and forcing these issues of constitutional protections before the court. And it's being, it's constantly being done in our culture. It was never intended to be, and the courts remain busy on that, and they never should have been. But nevertheless, tell us what's this new organization that you're...
The Justice Commission.
The Justice Commission, I understand, is your next endeavor. Tell us, the listeners, a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. The Michigan Justice Commission was founded by help with the Samuel T. Rick Proctor Conference out of Chicago. In fact, we met a couple of times last year to hold our first Justice Commission hearing. And what those hearings were about, we would have a conversation with the formerly incarcerated, those that have been, mishandled by the prison industrial complex or the criminal justice system itself. And we just, as a board, convened to host hearings to have people tell their side of the story of what their experience was like. And the panel was made up of course, advocates like myself, but it also involved social workers and, individuals who had to interact with those people who were inside. So the purpose of the entire project from the Samuel D. Rick Proctor Conference, they went to 6 different states in the country, and they're gathering this data to host a conference with the United Nations in about a year to show the the mishandling of many cases in some states, how the prison system really is an inhumane system that's really not designed to rehabilitate an individual, but just to lock them up in a cage. And other, human rights travesties relative to this war on drugs. So Michelle Alexander was a part of putting some of the documents together relative to her book, The New Jim Crow, and a study guide was formed through the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, and it's sort of a 6-week study guide, if you will, to help bring community organizers and other individuals up to speed as to this issue of human rights suffering, incarceration, and, just the whole mess that's been created by this war on drugs.
I know that you were recently involved with a project in Eastern Michigan. Is that right? The prison system monopoly.
Yes.
The private prison system. Right, let me just give a little foundation to this. Inherent in what we're discussing, I don't know if it probably is in discuss. I'm sure this is one of our topics, but there's a belief that goes along with this insanity of the war on drugs, that is, it's created something that would, just say, okay, like I joked before, it's not funny, but what's wrong with marijuana is that it's illegal, right? Like, people get arrested for involvement with marijuana because it's illegal. For no other reason. It's not like it's involved with anything else, but it's because they have it, or growing it, or selling it, or transferring it, what have you. That's but for that, what would half of the police departments do? Which is the statistics of what's finding humans in prison for nonviolent, no victim crimes dealing with drugs. And there are many people that continue to support these principles because they are making money off of those who find themselves in violation of the drug prohibitions. And there is a open movement, is an investment, is people gathering and putting and building this entity that could be equated to the military-industrial complex, but it's truly like its own industrial complex of organized police and law enforcement entities that serve to enforce those laws, to lock people up and make money from the enforcement of it, keeps their jobs going, and it's a mess. So tell us what you make of all this, Joe, and how we're going to make it end.
Well, first of all, we need to get the public aware of what's really going on. Many of the problems relative to this war on drugs are what we call hiding in plain sight. There are laws that have been passed so long ago that it's almost a foregone conclusion that, if you get caught with drugs, you're going to plea bargain, you're going to go to jail, you're going to get a felony, and that's what you get for being caught. But the other side of this discussion, as you mentioned earlier, it's really a system designed to feed the military-industrial complex little cousin, the prison-industrial complex. And if you look at the two, neither can survive without some type of attack on people somewhere. Now, even the term war on drugs shows that this entire thing is enforceable. Why do we need to have a war if they can enforce drug laws? They can enforce it. It's already been proven. So, again, public awareness, getting people aware that this thing is happening would probably be a good start, and that's done through community education, outreach, getting people gathered together and having decent discussions, from either side of the discussion. And the second thing people need to be aware of would be their rights being taken away with bad laws that are designed to put good people in jail. And the third thing would be to look at the money we're spending, and let's say in the state of Michigan, $2 billion a year to feed our prison industrial complex here in Michigan. But we're only spending $1 billion on higher education. And if many people knew that, I think it would be public outcry that those numbers need to be reversed. And once you start talking about redirecting money from the prison industrial complex to education, you have to reduce the number of people that are being locked up, because now bed space will be limited. So violent criminals, those that harm others, hell yeah, they should have a place for them. But simple possession cases, people being caught with something in their pocket, that's just, it's unfair, and it's really disingenuous to the citizens of this state and to this country, in fact.
Isn't the challenge of getting this message out and education, dramatically affected by the war on terror, so to speak, and that there's so many things that have changed that have sacrificed what we normally understood as being rights or privacy issues that are just seemingly every time there's an issue that the suspension of civil liberties takes place in some capacity and never really gets back. Do you think it's more difficult to advocate for a less strong prison population in the context of quote unquote war on terror? I mean, isn't that always going to be that political challenge, or no?
I think it would be. The whole concept of the war on terror, to me, makes no sense. How can you have a war on an ideology? It's not a war on a person or a system of suppression, so to speak, but it's an ideology where anyone can be labeled terrorist. In fact, I've often spoke to people about this term called urban terrorism. You really need to be careful how that word is being used, because with the passage of laws relative to Homeland Security, well, you can be labeled an urban terrorist because you're a person in the neighborhood that's causing a lot of ruckus, so to speak. So in order to get you out, we can bring in Homeland Security laws to snatch you up and probably not charge you with any kind of crime, but just take you off the street and, begin you through the process of the criminal justice system. So it's really a broad subject, and it has many legs to it, but we have to start somewhere. We can't continue to ignore this problem that's, spreading not only around the country, but around the world. Other world leaders have called on America to end its drug war because it impacts the safety and the civility of their societies.
I hear you, and I think that message, especially marijuana, we're seeing that, and I think a lot of it is based upon the concept that a lot of people are using it, more people are using it or approve of it, and they realize it's a failed policy. But returning to the, the education of the prison population issue, listen. You're preaching to the choir over here. Understand that I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I like to call it constitutional lawyer because whomever I'm representing, I'm fighting for their rights. That is everybody else's rights, and any step that we give, that we give is giving for all. That's the way that I look at it. But I see our culture living in more of a, it's obviously then government induced, but like a sense of fear that challenges the message. You know what I mean? It's obviously media driven and fear mongering and issues, and I think it's played out politically. I just think isn't that one of the that's the propaganda campaign, I guess, for the prison system. One might conclude that, right?
Oh yes, I agree. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's in their best interest to keep fear. I remember I read a couple articles about the discussions of the moderators at some of these investment meetings, encouraging people to invest in the private prison systems, and the concepts were,
they're starting to normalize being in prison and going to prison to a degree, because I think that so many people are going into prison at some point or into jail.
Well, that's the whole point. They have statistics. One of the comments was, every year we pay legislators hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to their legislative position and write laws. Every time they write a law, I don't know how many passed this last year, 400 something in the lame duck session. I mean, every time they do that, it essentially, in some capacity, is limiting or regulating behavior in some capacity, right? Unless it's a law repealing something. But either way, more and more challenges, more and more limitations on rights are going to result in more and more laws being broken, one might say. And, they talk about the issues regarding the immigration reform as another capacity of needing facilities, to house policy changes or what have you within America. And it gets really kind of nutty, doesn't it, Joe? I mean, the logic of, more and more people using drugs, and the war on drugs is obviously going to keep producing, and therefore we need these facilities, and towns and villages need to invest so we can put these facilities in there. But they don't work, do they?
No, after 40 years of failed policy, I think the public's beginning to get sick and tired of how much money we're throwing at this system. But, the dark side of it is, these private prison owners, CCA, Geo, Lankin Hut, what have you, they'll go to a small town and talk to people about making money and how we can make money together. If you buy the land, we'll lease it from you, we'll build it, you make money, we make money, we'll all make money together, and that's kind of the logic behind it. So many citizens are coerced into believing that, this is good for the economy. If we build this jail here, we're all going to make money. But, hell, we've made money other ways in this country by not causing harm to other people so someone else can make money. So that's part of what drives this whole thing. And then, of course, once you employ thousands of people, how can you say, well, we're going to cut jobs here because we have to close this prison? You never get reelected.
That's right. So what do you think the solution is? Is there any...
Well, I'm sorry.
You got any suggestions on solutions or how people can focus their attentions to bringing about some different thoughts on this?
Well, yeah. We as advocates, all of us, you, me, those listening in and, those who may not be listening in, we need a coalition to help develop what we would call an exit strategy for the drug war. And that exit strategy could be designed to take to legislators to have them, without getting into much detail, sign a document saying they will pass no legislation that will cause harm to the citizens of their state. And that's the key word, cause harm. And then, of course, we as advocates can look back at what some legislation does to cause harm, such as, arresting a parent, children go into foster care, then what happens to those children. So I really believe with a strong document and the support of people from the entire state, just do it from a state-by-state, basis, not going to the federal government, but first change laws here in the state of Michigan. So, having some type of document, again, to help as an exit strategy so politicians won't feel that they're appearing to be soft on crime, but they can weasel out of the bad legislation by agreeing to do the right thing. That would be probably the first thing. We need a document in hand as advocates. To go up and talk to these guys in lobby is one thing, but we need something written up. And it's a cause no harm document as an exit strategy to end this drug war. And then, of course, educating the public, showing people what would happen if this money was redirected to your community. Now you don't have to build a prison because you're going to have millions of dollars to pay teachers, to bring, policemen back to work, to put firemen back to work, to make sure our society can operate. And I really believe with that type of advocacy campaign to educate the community, to show that everyone, whether you're in a suburban community or an inner city community, everyone is impacted by this war on drugs. I think people would be outraged. And now you're talking about tens of thousands of people turning out to lobby legislators to, cause no harm to the citizens of this state. So, in my opinion, that would probably be, a good way to go after this.
You described it as its own little nephew or cousin of the military-industrial complex, and I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking about just all the resources that are put into and how policing has really become kind of a state military. It's a very, very, very thin line now with the way the policing has become. You may have been one of the individuals that talked about it. It's more, they're not part of the community, they're like outside of the community. Law enforcement used to go in and know everybody within the community, and they would help and work together. It's not that way. It's become us and them kind of a scenario. But the point I wanted to make as you were describing all this was, money. The money we're talking about involved with the, that's supporting this failed war. It doesn't mean that people aren't still going to work and the other budgets are being cut and it's harder, but how are you going to replace that? That's always, I think, a challenge. Or how are you going to sell that to those communities that have for so often, been their source of revenue? And, isn't this, quote unquote, revenue distribution, and why? I mean, those are the arguments, of course, you hear, and I'm saying them, trying to with a straight face, and they seem ridiculous. But aren't those the arguments that oppose this? And what would you say to those?
Well, that's kind of a broad topic, but again, redirecting funds. I don't. It would take those who know where the money would best be spent to be on our side in this argument. Just like we have an emergency manager that's taking over cities, we on our side of the argument could have individuals with the same level of intelligence as an emergency manager to help redirect funds out of the entire prison system or the system of incarceration to redistribute that money, again, back into community services, social services, the things that communities desire the most. But as far as jobs go, that can be argued several ways, but I would look at it as you don't have to be a prison guard to earn money. There are other industries, from renewables to farming. I mean, there are so many sectors in this economy that are opening up where, again, these funds could be redirected to train people, including those that are incarcerated, that are going to be getting out to work in those industries. Now, there's a prime example of what can be done if you decide to have the right, let's say, political will. Dan Gilbert, Quicken Loans, everyone knows who this guy is, and he's, buying half of Detroit. Well, while in Cleveland, his company, Quicken Loans, Rock Financial, were part of a project called the Evergreen Project. And if you look up the Evergreen Project out of Cleveland, Ohio, you'll see how they were able to create community co-op jobs for individuals returning from prison to drop the recidivism rate in that area, which in turn began to shut down bed space in the jail because people just weren't going back to jail. Now you have a job, you're trained to do something, and they were actually putting people to work. And I'm sure that same type of concept could be done in any municipality where you have either higher levels of unemployment or you just have no type of job development at all going. But if you just look up that project, Evergreen Project, you can Google it. You're going to be amazed at what was able to take place in Cleveland, Ohio, prior to Quicken Loans moving here. So that's, one way that it can be done, just by servicing the community and making sure that those that are coming from the inside out, have an opportunity to get back into society. Banning the box on applications, things of that nature. But if we can reduce the recidivism rate, the bed space now has to be closed down. Other than that, it's going to be like that jail they're trying to build on Gratiot, a big white elephant in the middle of the community. And I'm sure society wouldn't stand for it. So, we as advocates, again, really have to take advantage of this opportunity while the tide is in our favor, so to speak.
Very well said. Any final thoughts before we let you go? And we see this. Well, let me ask you this. One of the, and I'm not sure if Michelle Alexander addresses it, but talk a little bit about the international treaties that seemingly have an impact on the overall policies that direct our federal government.
I'm not that knowledgeable on that particular subject. However, I know many advocates from the United States attended a meeting, and the International Drug Policy meeting, and most walked away with the understanding that other countries, again, look at America as a part of the reason that the violence exists in their country because of our drug policy. The demand is up, of course, and the drugs that are coming into this country are as potent as ever. So I think from an international standpoint, the drug war, most countries want to see the drug war end. However, when it comes to marijuana, it's my understanding that the United States passed some type of policy years ago, telling almost the entire world, hey, you're not going to have this plant. So if you do have it, we're not going to trade with you, or some type of crazy policy was developed. But I think out of this meeting recently, you had some of those countries now saying, you know what, if we want to legalize this, we're going to do it, and we don't need you to tell us it's okay to do it. We're a sovereign nation here, and we're going to do what we need to do to protect our people. So other countries, are looking at these drug laws and, prohibited drugs and drug policies as not really being of sound mind, sound judgment. So that's my take on it. I'm sure you guys, have more information on it than I do, but I'm glad that the world is finally standing up.
I was just going to add, I agree with your assessment. I'd also add that I think that there's some dishonesty in the policy because the prohibitions of it allow the government, the U.S. government, or whatever its international allies may be, to invade countries at will for those purposes in the name of the war on drugs. It's another, it's not anything different, I would guess, but that's the makeup of many of those. But listen, Joe, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And are you going to be anywhere where anyone can come see you, or anything to plug, or a place where people can get in touch with you if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, we're going to reconvene up in Ypsilanti in the next couple of weeks from the private prison conference that took place a few days ago. And as soon as that becomes, that date is set, I'm going to make sure I put that out on the internet. And also, just in closing, I'd like to throw it out. I have a film series followed by a PowerPoint, and I'm asking communities if they can organize a meeting place where we can bring this film and the PowerPoint presentation out. It's about a 2-hour piece, but it's a good way to, sort of get people to focus on the big issue of what the war on drugs has done relative to the collateral damage that any war causes. And that film series has really, really excited a lot of people. So, I'm open for discussion on it. I, get out and do what I need to do to help other communities organize. So you guys let me know, if it's something that you would like to put together.
Joe, it's a fantastic opportunity for those people that like to take advantage of it.
I want to talk more about that. Maybe we can try to coordinate something as a group. I'm fascinated by that. I think it's an important message we got to get out. So everybody thank our good friend Joe White for bringing us all kinds of important information and expanding on this fascinating topic. Joe White, thank you very much. Have a great night.
All right, guys. Take care now.
All right. We have